Alright, hello all, and a happy hump day to everyone. Welcome back to Intraverse Uncharted, the show that aims to remove the gravity from your world and send you on a journey through the stars. My name is John, and I'll be your guide on this relaunch podcast of Intraverse Uncharted. I think today's episode is going to be pretty awesome, but before we truly get into this episode, I'd just like to extend an apology to all the people who took the time to check out my first couple of episodes. For my lack of content on any platform that I have at this point. I'm sure many can relate, but sometimes the world throws some stuff at you and keeps you busy, and you lose track of a lot of the stuff that you have a passion for that you want to be doing because you got to do other things. So I'm sure we've all been there, but there was a long period in time where I wanted to be elbow deep into the show and couldn't be. So for all of you that did watch or listen to my first couple episodes previously, and for those of you who liked and shared the show on social media, I'm very sorry for how long it took to get back to this, and happy to finally be able to get going again. With all of that said, it has obviously been a while. So again, just want to thank you for tuning in, and just want to give a couple of subtle reminders. This is an amateur podcast, so my technology is not absolutely flawless, nor is my recording environment. You may hear background noise. I have a 4-year-old, I have 2 dogs, I have family, friends, neighbors, all sorts of stuff. Noises coming from my office space, like my fan, etc., stuff like that. So I apologize, and hope that as time goes by and maybe this show trends a little upwards popularity-wise, maybe I can soundproof and get some better equipment and stuff like that to eliminate some of that background. The goal, as previous, when we did this show the first time, I'm going to try to get back to doing this once a week. Looks like right now the goal is going to be for Wednesdays, but we'll see kind of how that goes going forward. If something comes up that prevents me from putting out an episode, I will post an update on various social media platforms to let everybody know what's going on. But overall, the goal is to have a weekly episode of some kind. This show, as said in other older episodes, will be pretty multifaceted. I'm going to try to talk about sports. I watch a lot of football, I watch a lot of baseball, I watch a lot of pro wrestling. Those are kind of where my strong suits lie, sports-wise. I'm going to try to talk, science and space. Space has definitely become a passion of mine in the last couple of years, so I really want to, dip my toes into that pond a little bit, for sure. We'll talk about food. I have a degree in culinary arts and love to go on rants about food and the restaurant business in general, so I'm sure we'll travel through that avenue every once in a while. There may be occasional episodes to talk about current events. One thing that I'm going to try to avoid as much as humanly possible is politics. It's just not something I want to get into a whole ton of, and the target of the show is to remove the things that are weighing down your mind, not enhance them. So I want to give you a break, give you some entertainment, and try to distract away from all the real world stuff that I know is bothering you and me and everybody. So next reminder is about where you can find us. Intraverse Uncharted content and stuff like that, I'm going to try to branch out a whole lot more over some various social media platforms in the near future. I've been messing around a little bit with TikTok, trying to get started there, where you can find me under @Intraverse_Uncharted. You can find me on Facebook. There's a Facebook page for just Intraverse Uncharted. On Instagram, @Intraverse_Uncharted13, and on Twitter, @Intraverse_U. Go check out those pages when you get some free time. Drop a like, drop a comment. I'll be posting content there, updates on when new episodes will come out, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully, in the near future, those will be banging a little bit more. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode, please remember to like and subscribe, follow on various social media channels, share this show with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your neighbors, your mailman, whatever, etc. Just blow it up, get it out there. Let's try to get this fired up. Maybe in the near future we'll be able to get some guests on, something like that. Try to expand a little bit. That way you're not just listening to me, but I'm going to try to make these shows as fun as possible, informative. Again, sometimes there will probably be some opinionated points, but today we're going to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to get into it here just about now. So let's go. Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, This episode is the relaunch episode of this podcast. So I searched the universe to try to figure out a theme for today's show that would be kind of about new beginnings. So today's topic is going to be space related. As I mentioned, that's a passion that I've been kind of in on. So we're going to go space related today, and it's going to be about NASA's mission STS-1. So for anybody who knows anything about space or space missions, STS-1 is obviously the first mission. It's -1. It's the first shuttle mission. So it's going to be about expanding into a different avenue of space when the space program here in the States especially was kind of at a low. Let's get into some of the background information right for this mission. Mission STS-1 used the space shuttle vehicle Columbia. Columbia took several trips in and out, but they used Columbia as the test pilot for the first shuttle launch. The first shuttle launch happened 42 years ago today, April 12th, 1981, just after 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It launched from Kennedy Space Center, where, NASA still launches from there, but we also have SpaceX and Terran and all sorts of really cool space-related things happening coming out of Kennedy right now. So yeah, out of the Kennedy Space Center at launch pad LC-39A, and it landed at Edwards Air Force Base in Los Angeles. It got up to low Earth orbit and had 2 crew members, John Young, Robert L. Crippen. The mission lasted 2 days, 6 hours, 20 minutes, and 53 seconds. It was fully achieved. And it traveled 1,074,567 miles, a total of 36 orbits around the planet. The mission took 2 attempts. It was scrubbed on April 10th, 1981, due to a timing problem in one of the Columbia's general-purpose IBM system computers. A software patch was installed that evening into the next day, and on April 12th, they were cleared to launch again. In summary for this mission, it was not just the first launch of the space shuttle, but it was the first time that solid fuel rockets were used by NASA in a crewed launch. Although previous systems had used solid fuel motors to escape the towers or retro rockets. STS-1 was also the first U.S. crewed space vehicle launched with an uncrewed powered test flight, or without an uncrewed powered test flight. So they built the machine, and instead of just doing a blank, empty launch, they decided to go straight to crew. Obviously a gamble. We know how later space flights and later shuttle missions took place. High risk, high reward is kind of, I think, how sending people to space has always tried to look, for sure. This NASA mission objective for the maiden flight was to accomplish a safe ascent into orbit and return to Earth for a safe landing of the orbiter and the crew. All 113 flight test objectives were accomplished, and the orbiter's spaceworthiness was verified. The payload carried on this mission was a developmental flight instrumentation package, which contained sensors and measuring devices, and they recorded orbiter performance and the stresses that the vehicle had on the stresses on the physical vehicle during launch, during ascent, during orbital descent and landing. Columbia's main engines were throttled to 65% thrust to transit the region of max Q. Max Q is the level of maximum stress on the vehicle. So if you're watching like SpaceX flights right now, about 90 seconds into launch, you can hear the flight director talk about reaching the point of max Q. Max Q is just, like I said, the point of maximum pressure on the vehicle, most sustained speed for the most part. Anything that could go wrong generally will happen in and around max Q. So it's the vehicle getting to that point is impressive on its first flight, and it made it through it without any actual problems. Once on orbit, both crew members got to safely unstrap and finally get a look around and open the payload bay doors, which was another one of those objectives that had to be accomplished throughout this flight. This was essential to allow heat rejection from Columbia's systems via the door's space radiators, essentially. Failure to open these by the end of the second orbit would have resulted in a return to Earth at about the fifth orbit. Like I said, they went 36, so obviously would have cut the trip more than in half. Would have been absolutely a mess for sure. As they opened the doors, the crew noticed that they had sustained some thermal protection damage on the tiles on the OMS pods. So this was televised to the ground shortly afterwards. Astronauts Young and Crippen doffed their emergency ejections suits just to be safe. Just, again, as things start to look fuzzy in an environment like that where you have almost no control, best to be safe. During the second day of the mission, astronauts actually received phone calls from President George H.W. Bush, President Ronald Reagan as well. Had originally intended to visit the Mission Control Center, but at the time he was recovering from the assassination attempt, and he was taken place 2 weeks before the launch. Reagan had only returned home to the White House 1 day prior to the physical launch. Most of the first orbiter entry was flown automatically. So as they were coming back, they had a lot of help from Mission Control and from Houston to make sure that Columbia would get through all of the bigger obstacles with a touch of assistance. Young took control as the pilot several times throughout landing, especially during the actual bring into the runway. He had to make a wide left turn and put it into the runway. Main gear touchdown was at Edwards Air Force Base. Was slightly slower than the equivalent airspeed that it needed, but further down the runway than planned as well, so it kind of pans out. This was the result of a combination of better than predicted orbiter lift-to-drag ratios and tailwind. Touchdown was about 6:20 p.m. on April 14th, and as they rolled to a stop, Young commented over the radio that this is the world's greatest all-electric flying machine. I'll tell you that. It was super. That's what he said. They obviously had some anomalies on the trip, but despite all the problems, STS-1 was completed successfully. And in most respects, Columbia performed optimally. After some modifications to the shuttle and to the launch and re-entry systems, Columbia flew the next 4 shuttle missions as well. So Columbia definitely had plenty of airtime for NASA. And obviously, anybody from my generation and earlier generations would also have seen plenty of other shuttles. Endeavour, Discovery, Challenger. Lots of other large flight vehicles, for sure. Some things may change about space travel for the United States and for various other places, for sure. But the mission still remains the same, at least in my opinion. The mission before us, before NASA, before SpaceX, the entire space community, is to advance our knowledge of the solar system and of the overall cosmos, and to expand the reach, our physical reach from Earth, to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. If you have been keeping up or watching any of the current space news, you'd see Artemis just released their Artemis 2 flight crew for their orbital mission around the moon, which is set to take place next year, 2024. During the press conference that they did for Artemis, they talked about how this generation will be known as the Artemis generation of space travel, essentially. Artemis is similarly built to the old flight system for the shuttle. It is, hands down, out of all rockets you can find right now, the most powerful rocket that we have as humanity right now, unless somebody's hiding something that we don't know about, obviously. Things like Artemis and SpaceX's setting to test launch Starship by the end of this month, those are going to be our next leaps into advanced space travel into deep space. Those are our stepping stones to get back to the moon. There are our ladder, there, if you will, to get to Mars and eventually beyond. Now, obviously, Mars is probably the last in our solar system that we can physically step on. If you go outside of that reach and you start getting, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, those are all gas giants. So we can't touch them, but we can get close and we can, do orbits and see their environment. They've obviously sent satellite probe missions past there before with New Horizons and stuff like that. Just going doing flybys, testing some environment, taking pictures, stuff like that. But those are good ways for us to test, just what's in the universe around us. All of the things that we need to sustain life are from space in some way, shape, or form. All the heavy elements were forged in the hearts of stars. Iron, things like that are all forged. Nitrogen, oxygen, helium, all of the big elements that comprise human life came from stars, came from space, came from, the Big Bang, from the creation, from all of it. It all exploded into life and gave all of us an opportunity here. And it's a really cool opportunity, in my opinion, to be able to try to figure out, A, where we came from, but B, to see the depths of space. If you get a free second, go look at some of the images that the James Webb Space Telescope is putting out. I will definitely be doing a future episode on the evolution of our telescope technology from Hubble to James Webb. And honestly, James Webb, its images are breathtaking to see deep space in the light that deep space does. Just the deep field picture alone. If you look up the deep field from James Webb, every dot that you see is a galaxy. And the range of the picture, the size of the picture to us, would be the size of a grain of sand that you're holding up to the sky. So it's a very small amount of the sky with 1 billion galaxies in it. So think about how many galaxies and stuff like that are out there. Galaxies, stars, planets. And that gets us to also the thought process of there being other things out there, out in space. Obviously in the news you've heard hems and haws about UFOs again. I know the Chinese space balloon thing drew a lot of attention to the possibility of extraterrestrial life and whether or not that was what we've been shooting down over our country and over various other spots around the globe. While I don't think that any of those are UFOs, I will say when you think about the depth of the galaxy, when you think about the depth of the universe, when you think about all the galaxies you can see in the deep field photo alone, it would be absolutely irresponsible of us to think that we are the only things that are alive throughout the entire universe. There's just no way. It would just be completely, I think the word that I want to use is ignorant, to believe that we're alone in such a vast cosmic horizon. And I think that as time goes by, maybe not this generation, maybe not even the following one, but I think that we will start to figure out if and when, if we are alone. And, I think that'll obviously be the biggest of groundbreaking things as time goes by. If you're like keeping up with anything space related, you'll notice there is a massive frequency of launches from SpaceX right now. Now, after the shuttle program was canceled, space went back to being a privatized enterprise, essentially. So SpaceX is paying for its own launch time. It's not as government funded as the flight program used to be. Elon is obviously flooding out a bunch of cash and trying to get out there as much as possible with the Starlink satellites and stuff like that he's deeply involved with, trying to expand global Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff, which is, all of those projects are pretty cool. Obviously, if you're not a big lover of Elon and how he is, those things are going to sound kind of ridiculous. Elon is eccentric in my opinion, but I think that his mind is probably 1 in a billion, and he stands on the shoulders of putting us outside of our atmosphere and into some place that, you know, we could possibly find to be either sustainable or terraform into being sustainable. Mars is definitely his end goal, and if I have to throw darts at the wall on this one, I bet he has a manned mission to Mars by 2040 if I really have to, you know, throw spaghetti at the wall on this one. I think that's always going to be the end goal, right? The moon even. NASA taking the Artemis program back to the moon, the orbital around the moon next year, and then 2026, I think they said, Artemis 3 will land on the moon, and that's going to be a joint effort. SpaceX is creating the lander, the landing technology, so that they can retake off and head back home. It's cool to see those minds working together and pool their resources and have this advance of technology that's going to take us to the moon, to Mars, and then beyond, hopefully. You know, it's just been so long since we've really had a ton of deep space happening at all. 1971 would have been America's last moon flight, and since then the furthest we've gone is low Earth orbit again and again and again and again and again. If I'm correct, which I think I've heard a handful of times, low Earth orbit is only 200 miles above the surface. It's not. I mean, that's far, but it's not that far, and so it's not, you know, the most impressive strength that we've ever shown. Again, with the Apollo generation going to the moon, and then the flight program for the shuttle never going higher than the International Space Station. And if anything had a really good opportunity, I think, to go to the moon, the shuttle program would have been it, right? It looks like a giant airplane. It can land on the surface fairly efficiently if you can find a flat zone. There's a lot of craters, but I'm sure that NASA technology could peek in and find some real estate, right, to put that thing down on. I think then, you know, you take back off and you come home. I think it's the all-purpose lander. Orion looks a little bit more like a capsule than an airplane. Orion is what's going to be on top of the Artemis rocket. You know, I think that they're going to do it. I think, obviously, announcing the crew to do the orbital mission and just gearing up, I think they're going to successfully do that. And Elon especially is going to want to take it another step further and another step further. And there are, I think, other places. I mean, I talked about earlier how there's only so many planets we can touch, right? Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect, so there's a ton of carbon dioxide. It's hot. There's just no way human life can be there without disintegrating. Mars is our last inhabitable zone, for the Goldilocks zone, at least, of our solar system. Going beyond that, you're kind of just flying around and orbiting things, doing some studies. There are moons, I think, that we have a shot at landing on, or at least trying to find life on. Plenty of icy bodies out there that I think we have an opportunity in the future to send missions to and find out what's out there that we are just unaware of. You know, for the future of space travel and for the future of us, I think, as a human species, I think we will be known as the Artemis generation. I think the Artemis program is going to be the boot that kicks the door open to the rest of the universe, to the galaxy, to just, you know, I think we are still so ignorant as to what is in our own backyard. And these missions, Artemis, SpaceX Starship, those are going to be, you know, like I said, the boot that kicks the door open for us to observe the rest of the universe and to hopefully learn as much as we can about where we come from a scientific standpoint. Like I said, with all of the heavy metal elements coming from stars, there's just no doubt that we all at least come chemically from stars. So it'd be cool, I think, to know more and to see more, and especially with James Webb doing the amazing work that James Webb is doing. Hubble still alive and well, and now the possibility, possibility is probably not even the right word, the certainty of manned missions back to deep space. I think we're going to learn a lot in the next, I think we'll see a lot next year for the orbital mission, but I think in the future we're going to see and learn so much about deep space as we get more and more bodies out into deep space, and more eyes and more scientific instrumentation. I can't wait to see what the data sets and stuff like that are going to look like as they come back. And just the build-up, the adrenaline of watching these teams get ready, the adrenaline of watching these teams load into the orbital vehicle, getting on that launch pad. There's tons and tons of fuel underneath them. It's a ticking time bomb, and like I said, we've seen disasters from the flight program in the past. There's always risk, but to be so willing to go and risk it all to advance human knowledge of the cosmos, I think that there's a special place for those people. That's, if somebody came to me tomorrow and just was like, hey, you get one opportunity to go to space, do you take it? Absolutely. Because not everybody gets that opportunity, right? It's a lot of risk for possibly no reward, but you gotta risk something to see it, I picked STS-1 for this episode because STS-1 was the rebirth of our passion as a culture to go to space and to explore beyond what we commonly know and see. It was just a new beginning for space flight in our country, and honestly, the world around. Just seeing our technology as we have seen theirs in the past, and as we're building new stuff. STS-1, I tried to relate as much as I could to how I felt going back into podcasting and into this episode. As I said in the beginning of this episode, I obviously had plenty of time off, and this was always kind of in the forefront of my mind as to something I really wanted to be a part of and wanted to revitalize. So STS-1 being the revitalization of the space program meant something in 1981, and STS-1 being the revitalization of hopefully many successful podcasting experiences to come. I think those are two just incredibly relatable things, hopefully, in the future for us. If you watched any of my previous, I think I did 2 main podcast episodes, and I did a cooking tutorial episode, but in the 2 main podcasting episodes, I always tried to end with a quote of the day, just something to get you thinking, get you inspired. I know that in the previous months, as I've kind of been up and down with mental health, as I'm sure plenty of people have, doing quotes and watching motivational videos and stuff like that has fueled me to want to dig in, to do cool projects and get back to doing this project, which is something that I really wanted to get hands on. So we're going to go back to doing that. We're going to quote of the day to end this thing out. So the quote of the day today is going to be by Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs said, your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know it when you find it. I've definitely watched, I'm pretty sure that quote alone comes from a commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave, obviously before passing, and it was an amazing speech altogether. So if you get 10 free minutes, go check that out too. I think that's going to do it for today's episode, you guys. This one was, about a half hour, maybe a little more. That's kind of, I think, what we can expect in the near future. Maybe a little longer here, a little longer there, as we find other things that we're going to dig into. But I hope you all enjoyed the content. like I said, STS-1 was a new beginning for a beat-up American space program. So I felt it was very fitting for STS-1 to be the revitalization of this podcast as well. And, I think we're going to find more meaning and more depth into the things that we do on this show going forward. And like I said, hopefully in the future we get some other voices on here so we can have some talk, some debate, some opinion. Like I said, I'm still deep into the sports game too, so baseball season just fired up. Football season coming up in August. Pro wrestling never ends, and WWE just had its big merger with Endeavor and UFC, which is a chart topper for sales, and where a product like that has been kind of up and down to watch for a little while. I think this might be a good turning point, but we'll see. We'll see going forward, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in episodes to come. But again, thank you guys so much for your patience with this show, with me, with all the time that I took away. It means a lot for you guys to re-listen to these episodes and to like and subscribe and follow and share and send this off across the radio waves, and let's try to bring in as much as we can, as many people as we can, and keep this thing going, hopefully for a long time to come. As always, I ask that you do more than simply exist, and I want to thank you and welcome you and invite you to come with me into the Uncharted.